objected to counsel making an argument to the jury, when he should confine himself simply to an opening statement. Mr. Whitney's face flushed as a ripple of amusement ran through the courtroom, but the objection was sustained, and after a brief summary of what the contestant proposed to show, he resumed his seat, and the court then adjourned until the following morning. The first testimony introduced on the following day was to establish the unimpeachable honesty and integrity of the deceased Hugh Mainwaring. Both Mr. Elliott and Mr. Chittenden were called to the stand, and their examination, particularly the cross-examination, in which a number of damaging admissions were made, occupied nearly the entire forenoon, the remainder of the day being devoted to the testimony of witnesses from abroad, introduced to show that for years a bitter estrangement had existed between Frederick Mainwaring Scott, the alleged foster father of the proponent, and the members of the Mainwaring family, the deceased Hugh Mainwaring and the contestant in particular, and also to show the implacable anger of Ralph Maxwell Mainwaring against his elder son, and the extreme improbability of his ever relenting in his favor. Day after day dragged slowly on, still taken up with the examination of witnesses for contestant, examinations too tedious and monotonous for repetition, but full of interest to the crowds which came and went, increasing daily, till, on the days devoted to the expert testimony, galleries and aisles were packed to overflowing, while throngs of eager listeners gathered in the corridors about the various exits. It soon became evident that Ralph Mainwaring's oft-repeated assertions concerning the elaborate preparation he had made for the coming contest were no idle boast. Nothing that human ingenuity could devise had been left undone which could help to turn the scale in his own favor. The original will of Ralph Maxwell Mainwaring, by which his elder son was disinherited, was produced and read in court. Both wills were photographed, and numerous copies, minute in every detail, made, in order to show by comparison the differences in their respective signatures. Under powerful microscopes it was discovered that several pauses had been made in the signature of the later will. Electric batteries were introduced to show that the document had been steeped in coffee and tobacco juice, to give it the appearance of great age. Interesting chemical experiments were performed, by which a piece of new paper was made to look stained and spotted as if mildewed and musty, while by the use of tiny files and needles, the edges, having first been slightly scalloped, were graded, and the paper punctured till it presented a very similar aspect to the will itself, as though worn through at the creases and frayed and tattered with age. But the accumulation of this overwhelming mass of expert testimony failed to make the impression upon counsel for proponent which had been anticipated by the other side. Mr. Sutherland varied the monotony of the direct examinations by frequent and pertinent objections, while Barton and Barton took occasional notes, which were afterwards passed to Sutherland and Montague, and by them used with telling effect in the cross-examinations. But the faces of one and all wore an expression inscrutable as that of the Sphinx. Only once was their equanimity disturbed by any ripple of agitation, and then the incident was so little understood as to be soon forgotten. As the third day of the trial was drawing to a close, a dispatch in cipher was handed Mr. Sutherland, which when translated seemed to produce a startling effect upon its readers. Barton and Barton exchanged glances and frowned heavily. Mr. Sutherland's face for one brief moment showed genuine alarm, and Harold Mainwaring, upon reading the slip of paper passed to him, grew pale. A hurried consultation followed, and Mr. Montague left the courtroom. On the following morning the papers announced that at 11 p.m. the preceding night, the Victoria, the private car of the president of one of the principal railway lines, with special engine attached, had left for the West, evidently on business of great importance, as everything on the road had been ordered sidetracked. It was stated that no particulars could be ascertained, however, regarding either her passengers or her destination, the utmost secrecy being maintained by those on board, including even the trainmen. This item, though attracting some attention, caused less comment than did the fact that for the 3 days next ensuing, neither the senior Mr. Barton nor Mr. Montague was present in court. But no one suspected any connection between the two events, or dreamed that the above gentlemen, with two of New York's most skilled surgeons, were the occupants of the president's private car, then hastening westward at almost lightning speed. On the afternoon of the 6th day of the trial, as it became apparent that the seemingly interminable evidence submitted by contestant was nearly at an end, the eager impatience of the waiting crowd could scarcely be restrained within the limits of order. A change was noticeable also in the demeanor of proponent and his counsel. For the 2 days preceding, they had appeared as though under some tension or suspense. Now they seemed to exhibit almost an indifference to the proceedings, as though the outcome of the contest were already a settled fact, while a marked gravity accompanied each word and gesture. At last the contestant rested, and all eyes were fixed upon Mr. Sutherland, as after a brief pause he rose to make, as was supposed, his opening statement. Instead of addressing the jury, however, he turned towards Judge Bingham. "Your Honor," he began in slow, measured tones, "it now lacks but little more than an hour of the usual time for adjournment, and after the constant strain which has been put upon our nerves for the past 6 days, I feel that none of us, including yourself, Your Honor, are in a sufficiently receptive mood to listen to the testimony which the proponent has to offer. In addition to this is the fact that our most important witness is not present this afternoon. I would therefore ask for an adjournment to be taken until 10 o'clock next Monday morning, at which time I will guarantee Your Honor and the gentlemen of the jury that the intricate and elaborate web of fine-spun theories which has been presented will be swept away in fewer hours than the days which have been required for its construction." There was an attempt at applause which was speedily checked, and without further delay the court adjourned. As judge, jury, and counsel took their respective places on the following Monday, at the hour appointed, the scene presented by the old courtroom was one never before witnessed in its history. Every available inch of standing room, both on the main floor and in the galleries, was taken. Throngs were congregated about the doorways, those in the rear standing on chairs and benches, that they might obtain a view over the heads of their more fortunate neighbors, while even the recesses formed by the enormous windows were packed with humanity 2 rows deep, the outer row embracing the inner one in its desperate attempts to maintain its equilibrium. The opposing sides presented a marked contrast in their appearance that morning. Ralph Mainwaring betrayed a nervous excitement very unusual in one of his phlegmatic temperament. His face alternately flushed and paled, and though much of the old defiant bravado remained, yet he awaited the opening of proceedings with visible impatience. Nor was Mr. Whitney less excited, his manner revealing both agitation and anxiety. On the part of Harold Mainwaring and his counsel, however, there was no agitation, no haste. Every movement was characterized by composure and deliberation, yet something in their bearing, something subtle and indefinable, but nevertheless irresistible, impressed the sensibilities of the vast audience much as the oppressive calm which precedes an electric storm. All felt that some great crisis was at hand, and it was amid almost breathless silence that Mr. Sutherland arose to make his opening statement. "Gentlemen of the jury," he began, and the slow, resonant tones penetrated to the farthest corner and out into the corridors where hundreds were eagerly listening. "As a defense to the charges sought to be established in your hearing, we propose to show, not by fine-spun theories based upon electrical and chemical experiments, nor brilliant sophistries deduced from microscopic observations, but by the citation of stubborn and incontrovertible facts, that this document," holding up the will, "copies of which you now have in your possession, is the last will and testament of Ralph Maxwell Mainwaring, executed by him on the night preceding his death, and as such entitled to stand; that this will, from the date of its execution to the day of its discovery on the 7th of July last, was wilfully and fraudulently withheld from publication, and its existence kept secret by the deceased Hugh Mainwaring; that the proponent, Harold Scott Mainwaring, is the lawful and only son of the beneficiary named therein, and as such the sole rightful and lawful heir to and owner of the Mainwaring estate. More than this, we propose at the same time and by the same evidence to forever disprove, confute, and silence any and every aspersion and insinuation which has ever been brought against the character of the proponent, Harold Scott Mainwaring, and in doing this we shall at last lift the veil which for the past 5 months has hung over the Fair Oaks tragedy." Mr. Sutherland paused to allow the tremendous excitement produced by his words to subside, then turning, he addressed himself to the judge. "Your Honor, I have to request permission of the court to depart in a slight degree from the usual custom. The witness for the defense is in an adjoining room, ready to give testimony when summoned to do so, but in this instance I have to ask that the name be withheld, and that the witness himself be identified by the contestant and his counsel." The judge bowed in assent, and amid a silence so rigid and intense as to be almost painful, at a signal from Mr. Sutherland, the doors of an anteroom were swung noiselessly open, and approaching footsteps were heard. End of chapter 26.